This is the story of The Ugly Duckling by Hans Christian Andersen. It's just a section of the book. And here is a little synopsis to bring you up to speed to this chapter. Of the new brood of a proud mother duck, one of the ducklings stands out as particularly ugly and awkward. The other ducks and birds torment him constantly. Even his own mother, finding his ugliness shameful, comes to wish he had never been born. Before long he runs away from his family, and only to find himself rejected by everyone he encounters. Upon seeing a beautiful flock of swans, he feels both excited at their beauty and depressed that he's too ugly. And when he goes to meet them, thinking they will kill him for his ugliness, he sees his reflection in the lake and realizes that he has grown up and is as beautiful as they are, that he was a swan all along. It was a lovely summer weather in the country, and the golden corn, the green oats, and the haystacks in the meadow looked beautiful. On a sunny slope stood a pleasant old farmhouse, close to a deep river. Under some old burdock leaves on the bank sat a duck on her nest, waiting for her young brood to hatch, and she was beginning to get tired of her task, for the little ones were a long time coming out of their shells. At length one shell cracked, and then another, and from each egg came a living creature that lifted its head and cried, "Peep, peep! Quack, quack!" said the mother, and then they all quacked as well as they could and looked about them on every side at the large green leaves. Their mother allowed them to look as much as they liked, because green is good for their eyes. "How large the world is!" said the young ducks, when they found how much more room they had now than when they were inside the eggshell. "Do you imagine this is the whole world?" asked the mother. "Wait till you've seen the garden. It stretches far beyond that to the parson's house, but I have never ventured so far. Are you all out?" she continued, rising. "Oh, no, I declare the largest egg still lies there. I wonder how long this will last. I'm quite tired of it." And she seated herself again on the nest. "Well, how are you getting on?" asked the old duck, who paid her a visit. "One egg is not hatched yet," said the duck. "It will not break. But just look at all the others. Are they not the prettiest little ducklings you've ever seen?" "Let me see the egg that will not hatch," said the old duck. "I have no doubt it is a turkey egg. I was persuaded to hatch some once after all my care and trouble with the young ones. They were afraid of the water. I quacked and clucked, but it was all to no purpose. I could not get them to venture in. Let me look at the egg. Oh, yes, that's a turkey egg. Take my advice. Leave it where it is and teach the other children to swim." "I think I will sit on it a little longer," said the duck. "I have sat on it so long already. A few days will be nothing." "Please yourself," said the old duck, and she went away. At last a large egg hatched, and the young one crept forth. Peep, peep! It was very large and ugly. The duck stared at it and exclaimed, "It is very large and not like others. I wonder if it really is a turkey. We shall find out when we go to the water. We must go in, if I have to push it in myself." On the next day the weather was delightful, and the sun shone brightly on the green burdock leaves. So the mother duck took her young brood down to the water and jumped in with a splash. "Quack, quack!" she cried, and one after another the little ducklings jumped in, and the water closed over their heads, but they came up again in an instant and swam about quite prettily, with their legs paddling under them as easily as possible, and the ugly duckling swam after them. "Oh," said the mother, "that's not a turkey. How well he uses his legs, and how upright he holds himself. He is my own child, and he's not so ugly after all, if you look at him properly. Quack, quack! Come with me now. I will take you to the farmyard, but you must keep close to me, or you may be trodden upon, and above all, beware of the cat." The ducklings did as they were bid, and when they came to the yard, the other ducks stared and looked. "Come here! Here comes another brood. Look, as if it were not enough already. And what a queer-looking object is one of them. We don't want him here." And one flew at him a bit and bit him on the neck. "Oh my, that's very violent." "Let him alone," said his mother. "He's not doing any harm." Yes, but he's too big and ugly, said a spiteful duck, and therefore he must be turned out. They soon all got to feel at home in the farmyard, but the poor duckling that had crept out of his shell last of all and looked so ugly was bitten and pushed and made fun of, not only by the ducks, but by all the poultry. He's too big, they all said, and the turkey cock, who had come into this world with spurs and fancied himself really an emperor, puffed himself out and flew at the duckling and became quite red in the head with passion, so that the poor little thing did not know where to go and was quite miserable, because he was so ugly and laughed at by the whole farmyard. So it went on from day to day till it got worse and worse. The poor duckling was driven out by everyone. Even his brothers and sisters were unkind to him and would say, "Ah, you ugly creature, I wish that cat would get you." And his mother said she wished he had never been born. The ducks pecked him, and the chickens beat him, and the girl who fed the poultry kicked him. So at last he ran away, frightening the little birds of the hedge as he flew over the palings. They were afraid of me because I was so ugly, he said. He closed his eyes and flew still farther until he came out to a large moor, inhabited by wild ducks. There he remained the whole night, feeling tired and sorrowful. In the morning, when the wild ducks rose in the air, they stared at their new comrade. "What sort of duck are you?" they all said, coming around him. He bowed to them and was as polite to them as he could be, but he did not reply to their question. "You are exceedingly ugly," said the wild duck, "and that will not matter if you do not marry into our family." Poor thing, all he wanted was to stay among the rushes and find something to eat and drink. After he had been on the moor 2 days, some men came to shoot birds there. How they terrified the poor duckling! He hid himself among the reeds and lay quite still. Then suddenly a dog came rushing by him and went splash into the water without touching him. "Oh," sighed the duckling, "how thankful I am for being so ugly. Even a dog will not bite me." It was late in the day before it all became quiet, but even the poor young thing did not dare to move. He waited several hours, and then, after looking carefully around him, hastened away from the moor as fast as he could. He ran over field and meadow until a storm arose, and he could hardly struggle against it. Towards evening he reached a poor little cottage. The duckling was so tired he could go no farther, and he sat near the bottom of the door, large enough for him to slip through, which he did very quietly, and got shelter for the night. A woman, a tomcat, and a hen lived in the cottage. The tomcat, whom his mistress called "my little son," was a great favorite. He could raise his back and purr, and could even throw out sparks from his fur if he were stroked the wrong way. The hen had very short legs, so she was called Chickie Short-Legs, and she laid good eggs, and her mistress loved as if she had been her own child. In the morning the strange visitor was discovered, and the tomcat began to purr, and the hen to cluck. "What is that noise about?" said the old woman, looking around the room. But her sight was not very good, and therefore, when she saw the duckling, she thought it must be a fat duck that had strayed away from home. "Oh, what a prize!" she said. "I hope it's not a drake, for then I will have some duck eggs. I must wait and see." So the duckling was allowed to remain on trial for 3 weeks, but there were no eggs. Now the tomcat was the master of the house, and the hen was the mistress, and they always said, "We and the world," for they believed themselves to be half the world, and the better half, too. The duckling thought that the others might hold a different opinion on the subject, but the hen would not listen to such doubts. "Can you lay eggs?" she asked. "No." "Then you have the goodness to hold your tongue." "Then have the goodness to hold your tongue." "Can you raise your back and purr, throw out sparks?" said the tomcat. "No." "Then you have no right to express an opinion when sensible people are talking." So the duckling sat in a corner, feeling very low-spirited, until the sunshine and the fresh air came into the room through the open door, and then he began to feel such a longing for a swim on the water that he could not help telling the hen. "What an absurd idea," said the hen. "You have nothing else to do, therefore you have foolish fancies. If you could purr or lay eggs, they would pass away." "But it is delightful to swim on the water," said the duckling, "and so refreshing to feel it close over your head while you dive down to the bottom." Indeed, delightful, said the hen. Why, you must be crazy. Ask the cat. He's the cleverest animal I know. Ask him how he would like to swim about in the water or to dive under it. For I will not speak of my own opinion about our... Ask our mistress, the old woman. There is no one in the world more clever than she is. Do you think she would like to swim or let water close over her head? You don't understand me, said the duckling. We don't understand? Who can understand you, I wonder? Do you consider yourself more clever than a cat or a woman? I will say nothing for myself. Don't imagine such nonsense, child, and thank your good fortune that you have been received here. Are you not in a warm room and in a society from which you may learn something? But you are a chatterer, and your company is not very agreeable. Believe me, I speak only for your good. I may tell you unpleasant truths, but that is proof of my friendship. I advise you, therefore, to lay eggs and learn to purr as quickly as possible. I believe I must go out into the world again, said the duckling. Yes, do, said the hen. So the duckling left the cottage and soon found water on which he could swim and dive. But he was avoided by all the other animals because he was so ugly. Autumn came, and the leaves from the forest turned to orange and gold, and then as winter approached, the wind caught them as they fell and whirled in the cold air. The clouds, heavy with hail and snowflakes, hung low in the sky, and the raven stood on the ferns, crying, "Croak, croak!" It made one shiver with cold to look at him. All this was very sad for the poor little duckling. One evening, just as the sun set, amid bright clouds, there came a large flock of beautiful birds out of the bushes. The duckling had never seen anything like them before. They were swans, and they curved their graceful necks, while their soft plumage shone with dazzling whiteness. They uttered a singular cry as they spread their glorious wings and flew away from those cold regions to warmer countries across the sea. There's a picture. Could he... Okay, let's see. As they mounted higher and higher in the air, the ugly duckling felt a strange sensation as he watched them. He whirled himself in the water like a wheel, stretched out his neck toward them, and uttered a cry so strange that it frightened even himself. Could he never forget those beautiful, happy birds? Then at last they were out of his sight. He dived under the water and rose again, almost beside himself with excitement. He knew not the names of these birds, nor where they had flown, but he felt toward them as he never felt toward any other bird in the world. He was not envious of these beautiful creatures, but he wished to be as lovely as they. Poor ugly creature, how gladly he would have lived even with the ducks had they only given him encouragement. The winter grew colder and colder, as he obliged to swim about in the water to keep it from freezing, but every night the space on which he swam became smaller and smaller, and at length it froze so hard that the ice on the water cracked as he moved, and the duckling had to paddle with his legs as well as he could to keep the space from closing up. He became exhausted at last, and lay still and helpless, frozen fast in the ice. Early in the morning a peasant who was passing by saw what had happened. He broke the ice in pieces with his wooden shoe and carried the duckling home to his wife. The warmth revived the poor little creature, but when the children wanted to play with him, the duckling thought they would have do him some harm, so he started up in terror, fluttered into the milk pan, splashed the milk about the room, and the woman clapped her hands, which frightened him even more. He flew first into the butter cask and then into the meal tub and out again, and what a condition he was in! The woman screamed and tumbled over each other with their efforts to catch him, but luckily he escaped. The door stood open, and the poor creature could just manage to slip out among the bushes and lie down quite exhausted in newly fallen snow. It would be very sad were I to relate all the misery and deprivations which the poor little duckling endured during the hard winter. But when it had passed, he found himself lying one morning in a moor amongst the rushes. He felt the warm sun shining, and heard the lark singing, and saw that all around was beautiful spring. And the young bird felt that his wings were strong, and as he flapped them against his sides and rose high into the air, They bore him upwards until he found himself in a large garden. Before he well knew how it happened, though apple trees were in full blossom, the fragrant elders bent their long green branches down the stream which wound through the smooth lawn. Everything looked beautiful in the freshness of early spring. And from a thicket close by there came 3 beautiful white swans, rustling their feathers and swimming lightly over the smooth water. The duckling remembered the lovely birds and felt more strangely unhappy than ever. "I will fly to these royal birds," he exclaimed, "and they will kill me because I am so ugly and dare to approach them. But it does not matter. Better to be killed by them than pecked by the ducks, beaten by the hens, pushed by the girl who feeds the poultry, or starved with hunger in winter." Then he flew to the water and swam towards the beautiful swans. The moment they spied the stranger, they rushed to meet him with outstretched wings. "Kill me," said the poor bird, and he bent his head down to the surface of the water and awaited death. But what did he see in the clear stream below? His own image, no longer a dark gray bird, ugly and disagreeable to look at, but a graceful, beautiful swan, and the great swans swam around the newcomer and stroked his neck with their beaks as a welcome. Into the garden presently came some children, and threw bread and cake into the water. "See," cried the youngest, "there is a new one." And the rest were delighted, and ran to their father and mother, dancing and clapping their hands and shouting joyously, "There's another swan, a new one." Then they threw more bread and cakes into the water, and said, "The new one is the most beautiful of all. He's so young and pretty." And the old swans bowed their heads before him. Then he felt quite ashamed, and hid his head under his wing, for he did not know what to do. He was so happy, and yet not at all proud. He had been persecuted and despised for his ugliness, and now he heard them say he was the most beautiful of all the birds. Even the elder tree bent down its boughs into the water before him, and the sun shone warm and bright. Then, as he rustled his feathers, curved his slender neck, and cried joyfully from the depths of his heart, "I never dreamed of such happiness as this, while I was an ugly duckling." The end.